This is our Michael Fisher, Fear Talk number 4. I'm glad to have today two guests, Barbara Bickel here in Calgary, Alberta, and Nicole Rallis. Is that how you pronounce it, Renella?
Yes.
Rallis? Great. In Vancouver with her partner, Luke Barnsmore. So this morning, we'd like to start, Barbara, if you would mind, a little invocation as to where we are at this time of year, and also I know you have a poem for us.
Thanks, Michael. I'm going to share, just as an opening, I was just looking in my, I'm going to invoke a little bit of the feminine and the goddess today. So bringing some feminine to this talk on the FearTalks. And so we are in the Celtic calendar, the lunar calendar, we're in the month of Ash. So each month has a tree. So I just wanted to read a little bit about Ash. So, and I'm reading it from the Priestess of Ash from this book, which is by 3 women here. I'm just going to share that quick. So, the Melai are ash tree nymphs or dryads. They are a version of the Moray or Fates. They are wither triform, meaning a triple divinity, or ninefold like the 9 muses, the sacred number 9 connoting completion and the kind of finality associated with the Fates, triples this triplicate. This is like an increased octave of the creative power of 3 and a very ancient expression of the triple goddess. A pictograph dating from the Paleolithic depicts the 9 clan mothers. They stand in a row, bare-breasted, wearing bell skirts. The first 3 have white skirts and are spinning a coil of yarn-like energy. The second group of 3 are garbed in red and weave the yarn into a pattern. The final 3 wear black and are the crones who cut the coil, severing the lifeline. The young god, a form of Mercury or Hermes, reels before them as if in a swoon. A tiny replica of him bounds away in the background of the flank of a stag, an image of the young god in oracular trance journey, spun and facilitated by the 9 clan mothers. This idea is at the root of the 9 muses, the 9 priestesses of the Isle of Women, the 9 fairies of Avalon, the 9 maidens of the Standing Stones, and many other mythic groupings of 9. The Magdalene triple goddess is their direct ancestress. Odin is the god of ash. When it is said that Odin hung for 9 nights upon the ash tree, the world tree, what is meant is that he accessed the primordial feminine wisdom of the Malay, becoming all-wise. Odin is also Wotan, or Woden, or correlated to Mercury. His day is Wednesday, Woden's day, or French Mercredi. Wednesday is therefore Ash Day, and Ash Wednesday occurs during this month.
Thank you.
Yes.
And you have a poem?
And I have a poem. As we kind of talked about earlier, we're going to dedicate this Fear Talk to a mentor and friend and colleague, Carl Leggo, who is battling cancer right now. And so I have a poem from Sonia Sanchez from her book that I wanted to read. As a dedication for Carl and for Carl today. So she just calls this haiku. She's very much into form. So this piece is called Haiku. I come from the same place I am going to. My body speaks in tongues. Thanks.
FearTalks, something I've coined a few months ago. The idea is to create conversations around and above and below and beyond and aside to the topic of fear. So I love the idea, and I look forward to today of exploring the imaginaries, the imaginative, the irrational domain, in terms of coming to an understanding of not just talking about fear, but in a sense, reimagining fear and our relation to fear and relation to the cosmos, to the ash tree. All those possibilities. So I look forward to that today with you two. And I want to dedicate a small piece of writing of Carl Leggo, a couple paragraphs, from an article he wrote in 2011, published in the Journal of Canadian Association of Curriculum Studies. And it's timely because I also was thinking about if I had to pick a seasoned academic that I ever have encountered in all my years who actually engaged in my work on fear and fearlessness, it is Carl Leggo, interestingly enough, in this particular article. Pulled it out this morning, and this is how the title is Living Love, Confessions of a Fearful Teacher. As an educator, scholar, and poet, I am constantly asking questions like, who am I? Who am I in relation to the world? How should I live? What are the responsibilities of a human being in the contemporary world? When I first heard the news that Osama bin Laden had been killed by an elite team of American soldiers, I knew a complex and tangled nexus of emotions: relief, wonder, sadness, fear. For at least a decade, Osama bin Laden had lingered in my imagination like a specter haunting of destruction, mayhem, and hatred. I seem to have no control over the objects of my fear. I fear terrorism, and I especially fear the ways that terrorists are conjured as fearsome. Even when the most notorious terrorist in the world is killed, I cannot rejoice in the death of another human being. With the news of Osama bin Laden's death, the fears I know intimately and constantly did not evaporate. Instead, the fears only grew. So I turned again to writing. My writing and the writing of others in order to understand my experience of fearfulness. In the book, Writing at the End of the World, Richard E. Miller in 2005 asks this question. Is it possible to produce writing that generates a greater sense of connection to the world and its inhabitants, of self-understanding? Writing that moves out from the mundane, personal tragedies that mark any individual life into the history, the culture, and the lives of the institutions that surround us all. Is it possible? I think all three of us on this talk today, being within the academic sphere at times, they're a major part of our life. We're always confronted with writing. And this will probably be a part of a topic of notions of writing into fear, writing beyond fear, writing under fear, writing beyond into other possibilities of what writing can bring and the challenges and the traumas. As Barbara and I were talking this morning of her challenge of writing and then the relationship to image and the history of how abstract writing and alphabet had taken over with patriarchal cultures, especially Aryan and so on, that started to create this great conflict at some level between image, which was a sort of more primal base of relating, and then to letters and how powerful words have become. And that was certainly one of our talks that I had with both, actually with Forels and Luke, language and the use of linguistic structure is very important, and how to understand how fear gets even perpetrated, right, and perpetuated through a type of invasive, abstract linguistic structures. So words are very powerful today. So I ask us all, and I ask our viewers to think about words and their power. FearTalks is just a jump in, popcorn kind of popping approach. And that means when it's hot, jump in. So go. Anybody who'd like to just start? I would like to know, Nicole, actually, just as we punch into that, I'd like to know, when you heard about the Fear Talk, the 4 arrows that I did, and I know Barbara had come and visited you, you seem to want to do, you said, well, I wouldn't mind doing one of those talks. Without going into necessarily all the details of the content of that, I'd kind of like to know the impulse of your interest in this.
The impulse was really twofold. One is I was really inspired that yourself and Foros were engaging in the lunar and aspects of the divine feminine and talking about matrilineal loss. But I felt the desire to have female voices in the conversation, and I don't want to always gender things, but I felt that was something that could maybe help transform conversation in some way. And secondly, I was really inspired by this idea of FearTalks as a methodology. I'm very Socratic in the way I'd like to think and engage with the world. And this, even though we're not in person, it feels a little bit more intimate than an email exchange or writing pieces to each other. So I like the emergent aspect of the conversation.
Have you done this kind of thing before, these emergent kind of conversation recording and using it as a methodology?
No, only in person. I'm usually behind a camera. I've done documentary work, which I really enjoy, and photography, but moving in front of a camera is actually an act of fearlessness for me because I have quite anxiety around it usually.
Yeah, great. And so thank you for bringing up that notion of, again, we can call it genderizing, or we can even maybe call it a soft and gentle embrace of all possible identities connected to gender and beyond, that I think FearTalks really deserves to have that input. So I am very looking forward to that input. And I know I've written of the odd times of a question that came to me is, okay, well, if I read all the stuff that males say about fear and how to manage fear and all these things, and then I start looking at maybe some women's writings identified as women and so on. And then I keep asking sometimes the question of, is there any difference, of course, and do women know more about fear in a certain kind of way than men know about fear, generalizing in these ways? So I am interested in that question and have been for quite a while. And I'm going to just leave it open. I know, Barbara, you want to maybe jump in and say, why are you inspired to come in this talk?
Thanks, Nicole, for sharing, kind of going back to the dinner table at your place and talking about these talks and yeah, your desire to bring the feminine in. And I'm remembering too, you also talked about being curious and wanting to know more about how Michael and I have lived our lives, because we're quite different in our approaches. We have overlap, complementary and also conflict. Like we've got them all. And so I've actually left most of his fear talks to him. I come in little bits, but I've always, he does attract a lot of males in his work, and then I attract a lot of females in my work. So bridging is actually something. So it's actually nice that I'm just seeing us all here on the screen, right? And I've got these 2 beautiful males here and these 2 beautiful women here, right? And that we're here in this, complementarity. So that's kind of cool that we're doing that today. And then that reminder to kind of bring in the feminine. Michael invited that to kind of, what kind of an invocation do you want to bring into this? So that was good for me. And then this bridging, and that I think the fears show up differently. When I think about my own, what came for me, and maybe I'll just jump into that.
I think so, yeah.
Okay,
Barbara's reading her.
I've got my dream here. Kind of in my I am on camera, but I'm not usually talking. I avoid talking on cameras. And I end up editing myself a lot because I don't like how I sound orally, right? Mm-hmm. And my thinking needs spaces and pauses a lot to be able to kind of flow. I'm not like a rapid I don't have a rapid mind that can kind of, you know, keep the conversations going. So anyway, so I was kind of grateful for this dream, which was very intense, that came last night. And it came because I'm also reading, I don't know if you're familiar with this book.
Oh, I haven't read it, no.
Yeah, and I've had it for a number of years, and I've only just started reading it now. Anyway, it's bringing up lots of stuff for me, just around the, you know, the suppression of the divine feminine, of women, and how it continues on, and it's how it's so systemic in our, you know, pathological patriarchal world that we're in. So it brings up lots for me, and it also brings up lots because I come from a very traditional Lutheran Christian tradition, which is very void of the feminine, and I come from the most conservative of all the Lutheran different denominations. So yeah, to this day, they don't have female ministers in the Missouri Synod that I grew up in. Although my dad was a radical within that and left in his last 2 years before retirement. He actually went to a country church and left the Missouri Synod. But anyway, so I've grown up with lots of conflict around the Word, and the Bible, and I never connected with it. And what came to me from my dream last night, where I ended up in India, because of course I read a chapter on India and the patricide and the, you know, and the just the killing of women that goes on today, that's based in their I'm going to get it right now. Is it Brahman?
Spiritual philosophy of the Brahmins.
Yeah, that comes from that, and it's basically based in the reason that the sati is because there's a footnote at the bottom, is that they justify the sati, which is like having the widows, you know, burn on their husbands, you know, at their death, is to die with their husbands, is because they're doing it to prevent women from poisoning their husbands during life. So men are afraid of women poisoning them while they're married to them, and so they have this, you know, spiritual tradition where you have to actually die with your husband, so then you're not going to want to poison them. Anyway, just the sickness of it is just like, okay. So anyway, so I end up in India trying to rescue this particular colleague of mine who I know in real life. I'm trying to rescue her from her family, because she's in danger, and she seems to be ill, and so I'm in this rescue mission with her, and I'm trying to, like, very clandestinely, like, you know, tell her the plan to get her out, and I do partially get her out, and then there's these cats involved that get born, and they're very smart cats and kittens, and then I'm kind of worried that they're gonna, like, flush us out of our hiding place because the cats are connected to her. And then there's these 2 motorcycles with these 2 guys who I think are her brothers, who are in search of us. And I wake up and I'm in this very still place of, like, I don't want to like get found. I don't want us to be found. So I'm in this very still place. Like, that's the place in the dream where I woke up, was partially being out, but still being looked for and still in hiding. And so ended up coming in my own reflection with
at 4:30 in the morning.
At 4:30 in the morning was just, and then the piece where she was actually having to, like, escape from her family, and realizing that I really grew up with a feeling I couldn't trust my family. And so I grew up silent. I didn't speak in my family, and that worked out just fine for everybody, me not speaking. But I wasn't speaking because I didn't trust that I could actually be me. And so to protect my soul, I kept silent within that system. And it's taken years of, really healing through. And I remember at one point in, early on in my relationship with Michael, realizing this anxiety and terror that I held all the time, that there was some omnipotent, faceless, you couldn't see them because in the monotheistic, you don't actually see God. You don't know what God looks like, except you know it's man. And so this like even though it was not, part of my belief system, I was still carrying this, oh my gosh, I'm being seen all the time and I'm being judged all the time for what I'm doing, and I'm going to get caught doing something wrong. And so realizing that, like I grew up in an anxiety of that, which is a hidden fear, and it stays in the anxiety because it doesn't want to be revealed what you're actually fearing, that you actually can't trust those that are supposed to love you. So anyway, so that's part of what kind of came out for me. And then we have a big whiteboard in our kitchen, but I wanted to distill what all these reflections that kind of came. So I just gave you a bit of them there. So this is what I wrote then, trying to distill what was coming to me about knowing we were doing this fear talk today, of what the anxiety is, and that I still suffer from this anxiety, and it shows up in physical symptoms and leg shaking and still shows up, and I live with this unconscious anxiety. So this is what I distilled: was anxiety is sleeping unconscious fear that is embedded in the terror of living in a pathological system that is in chronic anxiety, fear, and terror itself, protecting itself from waking up. So that's what I distilled around. And so when I think about that anxiety, and then Michael was reminding me yesterday about a book from Carol Becker, a writer, and writes a lot about artists, and she's writing about women and anxiety, which I probably more connect with. And anxiety is just the unconscious not wanting to come into consciousness, fear and terror for me. And to me, living in the patriarchy and growing up in the Christian institution, not wanting anything to do with institutions, and following my art, and allowing that and the irrational to kind of lead me and to help me heal through, and then ending back up in academia because I felt like my images, my visual art, was not speaking and articulating what I really wanted to share fully, like it wasn't being read, and I felt I needed words. I was also terrified of words, and my whole master's work is about working through how do I bring the body and the words back together. So I'm going on here because it was a lot. But anyway, and then being in academia for 15 years, and now I'm out, I'm free again. We're free, independent scholars and artists. Yay! And I have this anxiety that won't go away because I'm more awake now. I'm aware of the bigger, systemic, really sick, toxic, pathological patriarchal culture that we're in. So it's like you can't escape it. Like there's no freedom from it. So anyway, that's a lot of.
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
So I'm going to ask you right now, in your own way, as the practice of the divine feminine attention that you have, a sensitivity and a sensibility of that, how would you now just invoke us to respond to what you just shared? I'll let you facilitate that, or just spontaneously. What would be the way you would come into that? Because it'd be easy in a conference kind of setting for people to jump in and whatever. And I just am curious what you would just bring as a transition on just what you shared.
Well, I guess I would bring in Bracha Ettinger's term of witnessing. So yeah, I just had you on the screen here as my witnesses, but I would also bring it and expand it to the witness, because I know we all, and you also spoke of anxiety earlier, right, Nicole? To actually maybe frame it as a witness. So it's not just about my story, but how are you with me in that? Does that make sense?
Okay. Kind of working with where you began and the book you were reading, and discussing, you know, the killing of the woman so she doesn't poison her husband in future life. I've been reading from a different, more of a neo-Marxist perspective, which I take with a grain of salt, which is Witch Hunting, Sylvia Federici's recent book, and the resurgence of violence against women across the world. So I think that kind of resonated with me, what you were saying. And also I really appreciated you bringing up the importance of the dreaming world. I often will in the morning talk to my partner and go through my dreams as well. And interestingly, what came to mind was resonating with the poem you read. The number 9 has been coming up a lot for me. So I think situating it with the poem you opened with was really helpful. So thank you for that. And then also, I think being open and honest about this kind of anxiety that we often carry with us on our daily lives in this patriarchal society is very important. And I appreciate, although our backgrounds may be slightly different, I resonate and empathize and feel a lot of anxiety as well. So I think it's great to have that at the forefront of the conversation, and unpacking where does that come from and bearing witness to it is really important. So
Yeah.
Is there a parallel between this notion of haunting and this anxiety? Are they similar phenomena? Is it something different? Would you, I guess I was just hearing some of what I've heard you talk about with haunting in the way that Barbara was describing the anxiety.
There's a quote that I wanted to share, and I think it resonates. And I think I might have talked about it with Barbara in our dinner conversation. I've been really inspired by Gloria Anzaldúa's work recently on rewriting identity, spirituality, and reality. And she says the job of the artist is to bear witness to what haunts us, to step back and attempt to see the patterns in these events, and how we can repair the damage by using the imagination and its visions. I believe in the transformative power and medicine of art. And I thought that really resonates with unpacking anxiety and understanding, or trying to understand where haunting comes from, and kind of having the courage to look inwards and deeply into where haunting is from in order to heal on a societal and individual level.